what's going on in space. So space started out as very much a government enterprise. So we see here the Apollo landing, which was very much a US government endeavor. For a long time, space was dominated between the US and the Soviet Union, and you really needed government level budgets and teams and expertise to be able to do anything in space for the most part. But that's really changing. So there is a whole global economy that's related to space. And it's a bit of an eye chart, but this brown section in the chart is the government spending in space. And then the blues and purples are all of the commercial activities in space. So there's a lot going on in the commercial realm of what's going on in space, primarily in telecommunications and also some navigation as well. But there's interesting things going on with remote sensing in the launch world, in the satellite manufacturing world. So there's a lot going on from a commercial perspective. And one of these big trends that we're seeing is what I call this billionaire rocket club. So we have these billionaires who have decided to use their wealth to build space companies, and specifically the examples that I'm highlighting here are for human transportation and expansion into space. So we have Richard Branson with Virgin Galactic. They're working on a space tourism concept, and they've been about a year away for several years now, but they're getting very close, and so I think we're going to start to see space tourism start to rise, and this could be the year where it actually is the year for Virgin Galactic. And a ticket to go on a Virgin Galactic ride is something like $200,000. So not the cheapest thing in the world, but the idea is that it's something that the mega rich start doing, and then as volume goes up, prices come down, and space tourism will become more accessible for average folks. Of course, we have Elon Musk with SpaceX, and this year is probably going to be the year where we see SpaceX launching humans on their privately built Dragon capsule, and they're launching NASA astronauts, which right now NASA has to pay the Russians to launch their astronauts up to the space station because we kind of dropped the ball when the space shuttle was retired, and so we're relying on Soviet technology, but soon we'll be going back to US-built technology getting astronauts up into space, and so that's SpaceX, and actually Boeing is working on a similar system. And then finally, a little bit less known, but still a really big name, is Jeff Bezos. So he has a company called Blue Origin, which is working on a similar vision that SpaceX is, which is building these human-rated, very large rockets. And Jeff Bezos has stated that his goal for this company is to enable millions of humans to be living and working in space. And so he wants to build the infrastructure that actually enables that to happen. And the way that he's funding that is just by selling $1 billion of Amazon stock roughly once a year. And actually this morning I got a notification that he just sold another $1 billion of stock, which to him, not a big deal, and is a great funding source for Blue Origin. Elon, while still very wealthy, doesn't have that luxury, although SpaceX is much further ahead with respect to the technology. So it's a bit of like a tortoise and hare situation. So Elon and SpaceX, they're further ahead and they've gone a lot faster. And Blue Origin, they have one of their mascots is a turtle, actually. So they want to go slowly and steadily and build up to a capacity that rivals what SpaceX is building. And so that's kind of like on the billionaire side of things, but there's also a lot of space startups, and that trend is continuing to grow and grow. So every year we're seeing more and more space startups and in a larger diversity of types of companies that are being built, and also more investment going into space startups. So there's more VCs that are getting into the space sector, people coming from different backgrounds, from finance, from marketing, starting these space companies because space is just getting more accessible with this kind of virtuous cycle of more and more investment going into private space companies. And this second really big trend that's going on right now is global connectivity. So this is a picture of SpaceX's Starlink stack of satellites. And SpaceX has this vision of thousands of satellites operating in low Earth orbit to be able to bring broadband connectivity on a global scale. SpaceX isn't the only one that's doing this. There's a company called OneWeb who has a similar vision, and also the Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk rivalry thing. Amazon recently also announced they have a similar concept called Kuiper, where they want a big constellation of communication satellites so that we can connect the entire world. What's the motivation? These companies like to talk about, we get to bring broadband to the undeserved and the rural population and stuff like that. The motivation is money. It's the money. So Elon wants to retire on Mars. He's made that very clear, and he needs money to do that. You can't make that much money just by launching rockets. We saw, if you took a look at the kind of space economy chart a few charts back, launch vehicles only make a very small portion of the global space economy. The money is in telecommunications. So the motivation here is to be able to get a piece of that huge telecommunications market to fund further space exploration. And if we're doing good along the way, then that's great too. But I'd like to bring up a warning from the past. So this happened once in the 90s. There was a big kind of effort to bring constellations of communication satellites. The biggest name out there was Teledesic, but there were other examples too. And essentially every one of those companies either never launched a satellite in the first place or went bankrupt along the way. And cell phones eventually won out because there was this time period in the 90s where it wasn't clear, is it cell phones, is it going to be satellite phones that are going to connect us globally? And cell phones for sure won out. And so it's not a done deal that these communications constellations are going to change the way we do communications. There's an existing terrestrial network that doesn't like to be disrupted. They're not going to just sit around and let the space guys eat their lunch. And it's very technically challenging. So just getting the satellites up and operating is a huge feat. These things cost billions and billions of dollars. And then you have to actually implement your ground strategy to get people to adopt your system. And it's much easier to just get a regular cell phone than a satellite phone, even though that technology already exists today. And there's also impacts on astronomy. So a speaker earlier today talked about seeing these train of dots going across the night sky. And really cool if you're just out camping and want to see a light show, but if you're an astronomer, those white streaks going across your plane of observation are ruining your astronomy observation. And so there's a lot of pushback right now from the astronomers who are upset at SpaceX, rightfully so, for going really fast with deploying their Starlink constellations. They're essentially launching 60 of these satellites roughly every 2 weeks or so. And they're lighting up the sky in a way that's never been done before, and if they keep going, it's going to be done at a scale that's never been done before. So there's these drawbacks that we have to pay attention to in the space industry where we can make an impact that was unintended. And finally, this last trend that I think about in the commercial space industry is what I call quantified Earth. So being able to create a network of global sensors so that we can better understand what's going on our planet. And there's different types of sensors that are being deployed. So things like weather monitoring, ship tracking, airplane tracking, connecting IoT, optical Earth observation, radar Earth observation. So there's a lot of ways that we can better understand what's going on our planet with this network of sensors. So at Planet, we have this saying, we believe that you can't fix what you can't see. So we're dealing as a global society with these massive challenges, and if we don't really understand what's going on, and if we don't have that information fast enough to do something about it, it's going to be really hard to tackle these global problems. So let's talk about how satellites are traditionally built. So this is an example of a Landsat satellite, where you can see with the human in the image. That gives you a little bit of sense of scale, the size of a small school bus. And typically these things can cost upwards of $1 billion per satellite. So they're very expensive, oftentimes very high quality, but because they're so and high reliability, but because they're so expensive, you can't afford to launch more than 1 or 2 of them at a time, which limits how much coverage and frequency of revisit you get from these satellites. And so there's a different thing happening with this new wave of new space companies starting called the New Space Revolution, where you have agile aerospace, which is something I'll talk about in a sec. You're essentially treating satellites as if they were software. So you're releasing newer and newer versions every 3 to 6 months, rather than building a satellite that's supposed to last for 15, 20 years. There's more and more opportunities to get into space. So there's more and more launch opportunities for these smaller satellites, and then all of the cloud-based infrastructure that enables all the data that you're generating from these global sensors. So let's talk about size for a second. So this is that Landsat 8 satellite, billion-dollar program, 30-meter resolution per pixel. And we'll see what that looks like in a second. This is what the Dove satellite looks like to scale. And so when you're building really small satellites, what that means is you can build lots of them. And then you can cover the Earth in a way that you couldn't do with a single satellite. So like I was saying, Agile Aerospace, what we're doing at Planet is we're taking all of the advances in the commercial electronics industry and folding that in to how we design and build our satellites. So roughly every 3 to 6 months, we have a new version of the satellite, and so the satellite technology is getting better and better. And even though the lifetime of the satellite is shorter, it's roughly 2 to 3 years, we're still able to keep all of that backwards compatible and just improve functionality as we go forward. And so with that, we've comprised the world's largest fleet of Earth imaging satellites. We have over 100 of these Dove satellites flying. They're medium resolution, and we also have this fleet of high resolution satellites called the SkySats. So between medium resolution and high resolution, we can scan the entire Earth every day. And so we can't see through clouds, but we're at least getting a shot once every 24 hours, and we're getting imagery of places all around the world much more frequently than was ever possible. This was a statistic I looked up a few years ago, so I'd have to double check what the current status is. But if you go on Google Maps and you turn it into satellite mode, on average, on a global scale, an image might be 1 to 2 years old. So a lot of times people are dealing with very old information about what's going on the planet. We're changing that with our satellite fleet that's already operating in orbit. So here's that Landsat 8 satellite, the billion-dollar program, 30 meters, and it revisits the same spot on Earth once every 15 days. That's a limitation that you get when you only have one satellite flying. So that's what a picture looks like from a 30-meter Landsat 8. And then with the Dove satellite, we get 10 times better resolution, 3 meters per pixel, and at a cost that's orders of magnitude cheaper. And we're getting a daily coverage. So we're able to see everywhere every day at this scale of resolution. And then we can zoom in with our SkySats in select areas, kind of on demand, and be able to see with greater detail what's going on in those images. So we can scan the entire Earth and see where areas have changed, and then go and investigate with our higher resolution satellites. And it kind of works like the human eye. So your peripheral vision is really good at detecting change, and it's kind of like a medium resolution field. And then where you focus your vision is the high resolution. So having those two systems work together, again, is something that's very unique to how we operate our satellites. So what are the different industries where this is relevant to? Defense and intelligence is one, but other civil government agencies, emergency management, energy, agriculture, forestry, mapping, the list goes on and on. And so one of the cool things about Planet and some of the other space companies in this space is the democratization of access to this imagery. So it's not just the spy agencies who are operating their own spy satellites getting information about what's going on. It's now a whole host of government, commercial, education and nonprofit. Different users get access to this. And so now there's kind of like a level of playing field with respect to understanding about what's going on our planet. And of course, a lot of this stuff gets really relevant when we see it in the news. So this was an image of the Iran strike on the Iraq Air Force Base, the US operated Air Force Base in Iraq. And so we were able to very quickly see the extent of damage to that military base. And it's not that the spy satellites from the governments that you would imagine didn't get imagery of that as well. It's just that they weren't releasing it. So for us, we released it to the different news outlets, and now that became an objective source of truth for what actually happened there, and that helped the conversation as to what was going on, whereas typically we'd have to just rely on governments to self-report what the situation was. And of course, a very local and relevant example is all the wildfires here in Australia. And what's cool with this example is actually this is a French newspaper that was able to use our imagery to help monitor what's going on in Australia, and so raising global awareness. So being able to, from wherever you are in the world, get a global perspective about what's going on or help understand your local environment, this is what's enabled with this data set that, again, has never really been done before. And finally, where this is all going, so we're able to produce these pictures, these sets of pixels, but we're generating roughly 10 terabytes of data a day. Way too much information for any person or team of people to be able to actually digest what's going on in there. And so we're working on these automated algorithms to be able to automatically detect features about what's in a picture. So to be able to automatically detect this is a road, these are trees, these are buildings, and do that on a near daily basis on a global scale, again, has never been done before. And I think that the key differentiator here is how quickly you can get this information. So if you were monitoring deforestation, let's say in Brazil, just with the Landsat data, you would get an update roughly once every 15 days. But if it was cloudy, you'd have to wait till the next 15-day cycle, and in places around the world, it's cloudy quite often. So it might be months and months until you actually get a clear image about what's going on. So maybe 6 months down the road, you can see where deforestation happened, but there's not much you can actually do about it. Whereas if you're getting a daily image, not only can you see where deforestation is happening, you could even see the precursor activity before that. So if there's a road that's being built in an area that's a protected forest, you can predict that based on past experience, this is the type of behavior that indicates deforestation is going to happen. You can send out enforcement and actually stop it before it occurs in the first place. So these are the types of things that are being enabled by a global data set that's never really been available before.